It's a mad, 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 mad world, yes. But why? Because what has been kept from us crucially, above all else, is who we are, the nature of life, and the nature of the reality that we live in. I started out after ridiculously outrageous things happened to me about 20 years ago. The top of my head blew off, and it was never the same again. Thank you, God. I started to ask big questions, because unless we ask the big questions, and most people don't because we're so focused on survival and today, surviving another day, you never get the big answers, how can you? And when you ask the big questions, the world looks very different. You start to realize, for instance, that there is a multi-leveled conspiracy to enslave humanity on multi-levels, mentally, emotionally, and therefore physically. And some other questions I started to ask, and this is where I want to concentrate on in this this first section, because it's so important. Because in the second section, when I get into the conspiracy as it's unfolding today in our everyday lives, that will start to make so much more sense in terms of why society is as it is, why it's structured as it is, why things are done as they are, once we realize what reality is. Who are we? Where are we? What is reality? What is life? How many people in the world actually ask that in their entire lifetimes until they get towards the end, maybe? And when you ask those questions, you realize it's all an illusion. This physical world that we take so seriously, that we think is so real, is just an illusion decoded by our body computer system to give the illusion of solidity. Great American comedian Bill Hicks, who said this: all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Encapsulates it. And really, the bottom line of the conspiracy is to manipulate our imagination of ourselves so that we imagine ourselves to be little me and powerless, and therefore controllable by the few. It's all an illusion. It sounds crazy to start with, but for the one and only time in my life, in 2003, in the Brazilian rainforest, I took this psychoactive rainforest plant called ayahuasca. And some people have a bad experience. I had a fantastic experience. For 5 hours, this female voice, it took the theme of, or the expression of, this female voice, as loud as mine is now, talked to me for 5 hours about the nature of reality and how it was all an illusion, explaining why it was all an illusion. And it was hilarious. I mean, my feet were literally in the air a number of times. It was so funny, because it is funny when you realize what we take seriously. And I came back after that, and I started looking in the scientific area and quantum physics and all this stuff to see if I could support what that voice had said from the mainstream science and the cutting edge of science. And I found that you could do it easily. Why? Because science is a series of disciplines, vast numbers of disciplines, and the buggers never talk to each other. They don't connect their own dots within science. Why? Because they're not encouraged to. Indeed, the opposite from encouraged to, because once they connect the dots, woo, this is life then. And when you do connect the dots, you realize that if they did, they'd already realized that this reality is an illusion. I talked in London in May last year, and a friend of mine who is a healer and he's a scientist and he works in scientific circles, and he'd done this presentation or been at this event at the Royal Society, like the holy grail of science, mainstream science in London. And he's met all these people, and he comes to my talk, right? You know, I mean, I left school at 15 to play soccer. You know, never passed an exam in my life. Thank you, God. Okay, so, and he met 4 or 5 of these guys who'd been at the Royal Society, mainstream scientists, and he said, what the hell are you doing here? And they said, well, we've come to hear it how it really is. because they bloody knew this. But if they talked about it within their science, within their discipline, within their arena, the funding stops, the ridicule starts, and they no longer are able to progress within the mainstream science. Why? Why do you want to? Follow what is. So, all the time we are decoding reality in an apparently solid three-dimensional way. This is an amazing guy. You might have seen some of these on the internet. This is an amazing guy who draws chalk pictures on the pavement, and all the pictures you're going to see are on a flat pavement. But because of the way he draws them, he gets the brain to decode them in a three-dimensional form. He's tricking the brain into doing this. These are all on flat pavements. Incredible guy, what he does. And here's another example. Because the brain is decoding reality, and you can manipulate that, and that's another big thing of the conspiracy, which I'll get to. All these things are optical illusions, tricking the brain to read reality in a certain way. And it could be done on a very deep level, and it is. Again, is that a section box, or is it or image, or is it a box, or what is it? It depends how your brain reads it. Most people seeing this for the first time will read that as a bird in the bush. Actually, it says a bird in the bush. Because the brain is used to certain things, you can drop things in that are there, but it doesn't read them because it reads according to the program that it's taken on. These kind of red colors are exactly the same, but because of their relationship to other colors, the brain reads them differently, and they appear to be not the same, but they are. As Einstein said, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And the reason for its persistence will become clear before we finish this first section. So I followed this amazing synchronicity that suddenly appeared in my life 20 years ago. And it took me through the five-sense level of this and how secret societies connect and all that stuff. I'll get into that in the second section. And then it took me through interdimensional stuff. And eventually, from 2003 onwards, with that ayahuasca thing, right up to the present day, the whole focus of where my life has gone is the nature of reality and who we are and all that stuff. Because this is the place where the key to open the door is. And, you know, it's great that that there are all this conspiracy research going on the level of, you know, engineered wars and stuff and backgrounds to Obama. It's very important that we know this. But if we only do that, then we're just learning more and more and more about our own prison. This stuff can show us how to open the door, open the cell door. So when you ask the question, where are we? We're in a virtual reality universe. In so many ways now, technology, although on a far more basic level, is starting to mirror the reality we're actually experiencing. I saw this cartoon. I thought it was very apt. The universe is amazing, isn't it, Captain? It's very mysterious. A lot of things we don't know about, like dark matter, dark energy, multiverses. System error, reboot, reloading universe. We know less than you think. And although that's a kind of simple kind of analogy, that is basically what we're looking at, a virtual reality universe of incredible sophistication compared with the virtual reality that we have in this world now, but the theme is just the same. Even in this comparatively Stone Age level of virtual reality that we're in at the moment, things are getting more and more sophisticated, and the quality of the images are getting more and more advanced. And if we keep going on this level into the far distance, as we perceive distance and perceive future, we'd end up with something like this eventually. This guy here, part of him is the real him, part of him is the virtual reality him. And again, the theme is just the same. How virtual reality is getting more and more. I mean, there's more and more virtual reality simulations to teach people how to do things. films like this stuff to help soldiers train and all that stuff, and flying simulations. And this is in a hospital where they put people on a virtual reality system when they're treating their burns, and the virtual reality is feeding them things that are images that are very cold, which the brain is reading and decoding, and it makes the pain of the dressing, etc., far less than it would be, because the brain's not decoding this to the extent that it would, because it's also decoding the opposite to it through the virtual reality. And what is virtual reality? These games. You have the goggles that use the eyes sense. You have the gloves that use the touch sense. The virtual reality games that we are using, and the more advanced ones, are simply mirroring reality. They're mirroring the five senses and using the five senses. Because what the five senses are doing is receiving vibrational information. It's what they do. I mean, the ear is the obvious one with sound, but they're all receiving vibrational information, turning it into electrical signals, another form of the same information, passing it to the brain, which then decodes that into the world we think is out there, but actually this only exists in here. We talk about space and distance, but when you look into the night sky and you see all those stars, all those lights from stars are where they used to be, anyway, and they seem so far away, and yet the only place they exist in that form is in our decoding system that turns them into an apparent physical world. So that's where the world exists. Imagine if you're the few and you know that, and you keep that understanding from the population. And you know that all you've got to do is manipulate the population's decoding system, and they will experience the reality you've manipulated them to decode. That's what's going on. That's why it's kept from us, the true nature of the reality we're living in. Because then we become controllable. This is absolutely right in the Matrix. This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. That's what it is. The world we think is out here only exists in here. And that is a fundamental revelation to understanding how the few control the many. On one level, this reality is digital. It's a digital reality on one level. It's vibrational on another one. There's many levels of it. And it's a decoded world in terms of its physicality. The body is a computer, a biological computer. By biological, I mean it has the ability to think for itself. It's not that it's just reacting to data in the way that it's programmed to react to data. It has the ability to think for itself, certainly up to a point. And the key level of the conspiracy is to get us to believe that we are the computer, and therefore forget that we are that which is working through the computer. Consciousness. False identity. So, who are we? Big question. We think we're humans. We think we are Joe Bloggs and Bill Jones. But that's an experience. What we call human is an experience. It's not who we are. We are consciousness, energy, consciousness, having the experience. This is the vehicle to experience this reality. if I want to experience radio 1, I have to get a vehicle, a radio, that is tuned to radio 1. Otherwise, I can't access and experience it. Same with this reality. Our consciousness is vibrating too fast. Eventually, if you go high enough within consciousness, it's not vibrating at all. But it's vibrating too fast to interact. I couldn't pick this up. My consciousness couldn't pick this up because the difference between this frequency and my consciousness is too great. So we take on a vehicle which is vibrating within the frequency range of this reality, and then I can interact with it. They've kidded us that the vehicle is who we are. And that's why we see ourselves in such limited terms. We are multi-level consciousness. Extraordinary, infinite genius. On the lower levels of this multi-level consciousness, it's actually photographable now, through things like Kirlian photography and such techniques. We are energy. And this is my mum. She died a few years ago. And I had this experience on the day of the funeral, which really gave me this profound insight into who we are. Funny enough, I got to my age a few years ago. I'd never seen a dead body ever. Just never been my experience. But my brother said to me, "Would you like to see your mother in the open coffin in the funeral parlor?" And my immediate reaction was, "No, I don't need to see that. I remember her as she was. She's consciousness anyway." But then something said to me, "Go, go, go." And this intuitive level, which says things like that, I never deny, because it's taken me into so many amazing places I wouldn't have gone otherwise. And I went. And there was my mother in this open coffin. And it sounds saying the obvious, but that body was dead. I've never seen anything so dead in my life. It was completely lifeless. And next to it was this picture, a massive blown up picture, which my brother was going to put in the funeral service. And I've stood there and I'm looking at this dead body. And I'm looking at this picture, and this picture's alive, because photographs can pick up the energy of us, as well as just the physical. And the sparkle, the energy that's coming off that picture was not coming off that body. The energy that's coming off that picture and not off that body, that is what had left. And that's why there's such a lifeless thing was left behind. The computer, that's all it was. That life force is who we are. And you see this and experience this through people who have what we call near-death experiences. When they leave the body dies, and then the body's revived, and they find themselves back in the body, and often they talk about going through the tunnel and all the rest of it. And this is what one near-death experiencer said about what he experienced in that out-of-body state. Everything from the beginning, my birth, my ancestors, my children, my wife, everything comes together simultaneously. I saw everything about me and about everyone who was around me. I saw everything they were thinking now, what they thought then, what was happening before, what was happening now. There is no time, there is no sequence of events, no such thing as limitation of distance, of period, of time, of place. I could be anywhere I wanted to be simultaneously. That is who we really are. That's who we really are, and that's what this conspiracy, in its bottom foundation level, is seeking to and must to prosper, keep from us. And that's why this knowledge is so suppressed through the ages, and religion has played a massive part in suppressing this. We think we're the body, but it's the vehicle. Einstein said, this delusion is a kind of prison for us. restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from the prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. In other words, once we lose the idea that we are individual little me and realize all that is, we start to connect again with all that is, and not just with a few people around us who connect into our sense of individuality and Ethel Jones and Charlie Smith. Any picture of this theme, this type, is from a guy called Neil Haig. He's a great friend of mine in England, an artist, and he's a very, very original artist. And he has this unbelievable ability to not quite read my mind, because I do explain what I want and what I'd like him to portray and stuff, but he has this wonderful ability to then deliver a picture, and I go, crikey, if I was an artist, and I'm shite, I would draw it exactly like that. That's what was in my mind. It's an amazing connection that we seem to have. And this is the difference, a real important difference that I want to make. Okay, again, it's all words and it's how they're defined. I'm going to define the words for this day. Consciousness is the word I'm using for what we really are. All that is, has been, ever will be. And consciousness has an experience within this reality if it chooses to. However, as I said about we must take on a shell and all that stuff to act with this reality, it's very similar to if you want to go on the internet, you can't just sit there in a chair on an empty desk and go on the internet. You need a conduit, you need an interface through which you can access that collective reality we call the World Wide Web, and it's called a computer. What consciousness does is exactly the same in a fantastically more sophisticated way. It takes on what I call the biological computer, the body, as its interface. And the body and its immediate energy field, I'm calling the mind. And the is very important. Because for me, the more that I kind of start to understand this, we talk about my mind, your mind, his mind, her mind. No, I would say that's not how it is. It's the mind. The mind is the interface between consciousness and this reality. And you can be a Wall Street banker over here and a New Ager over there and still be in the same mind. And what the conspiracy is about, in its primal level, is pulling us and our point of perception into the vehicle, into the interface, the mind, and out of consciousness. And what's happening now, and I get into this in the last section, is there are changes taking place vibrationally in this reality, which is helping people to open their minds to consciousness, and therefore people are, as we say, waking up from mind into consciousness. And the moment we start to do that, bang, we see the world in a completely different way. Why? Because our point of perception, our point of observation moves out of mind into consciousness. And the mind is a very good thing, because we can use that to interact with this reality. And the mind operates through something called thought, which is a very, very low level of perception. Consciousness operates through something I call knowing. It's all knowing. It's all that is, has been, and ever will be. Therefore, it's not constantly working things out. That's why when you enter a state of consciousness, you go into a place of silence. When you're stuck in mind or interacting with mind, that's what the chatter is all the time. The mind never shuts bloody hell up. Whereas you go into consciousness and there's silence. Why? We live in a world of things. And everything seems to be things. We live in a world of noise, constant noise now. But that's not the prime reality, though we think it is. The prime reality is consciousness, which is silence. It's silence because it doesn't have to work things out, because it knows. And we think silence is nothing. So we say, can you hear anything? No. Nothing. No. Nothing. And yet, everything comes out of the silence and goes back into the silence, because what consciousness is at its highest level is all possibility, all potential. And in the silence is all potential, all possibility. And then when I start talking, I'm pulling through sound one possibility out of all possibility, and now through the senses, now I'm in one possibility. So when we have silence, and I start talking, the noise comes out of the silence, and as soon as I stop talking, the noise goes back into the silence. And it's the same with space. With space, what is space? It's no thing. The reality here is things. But what defines this theater? As much as the things, the seats and the ceilings, what defines it is the no-thing. And in the realm of things, things come out of the no-thing. And then they go back. That's what's happening when we die. We're born out of the no-thing into the world of things, and then the body goes back into no-thing. And one of the things that stresses people out, if we could come to terms with it, it would be a lot more helpful, is we're always trying to find stability and permanence in a world of things, when the world of things is, by very definition, totally impermanent. The permanence is the no-thing, the silence, consciousness, which is what we always will be. And so when we come in to the mind, if we come in and hold that connection to consciousness, then we're in this world and we can use the mind to interact with it, but our point of observation is beyond it. And therefore we see things from this point of view. We become observers rather than caught in it. If we lose contact with consciousness, we come into this reality and we become prisoners of the mind in that eggshell. And now we're in this world and of it. And if we are in that state, we're not getting our inspiration and our knowingness from consciousness and getting a fix on who we are and the nature of reality. So where do we get it from? Through the five senses. And who's controlling that information? Those that control the media, those that control education, those that program one generation called parents, who then program the next generation thinking they're doing the best for their kids. And so we have this mind-controlled society which is unconscious. Consciousness is like the ocean, the everything. Mind, of course, is a form of consciousness because everything is, but it's a much more concentrated and static and limited form of consciousness that we call mind and thought. And we call it intellect too. It's funny. Well, it's not just funny. It's kind of explains why we live in a society that worships the intellect. Oh, he's got a great mind. Oh, he's mindless. Ooh, look at him. We worship the mind. We worship the intellect. We reward intellect. And we laugh and ridicule at those who come from a position of consciousness because intellect literally cannot get its mind round the perceptions and perspectives of consciousness because that's not where it's coming from. Let's just do that again. So if we open the mind, and all these phrases we use, and they're so, we're spouting these classic truths all the time. When we open our mind and let consciousness in, the mind becomes a servant to consciousness and not the governor of our perception. And that's the state that more and more people are starting to get into, and therefore their perception of reality is transforming in an amazing way all around the world. I've been to nearly 50 countries now. I think it's 48 or something like that. I tell you what, this awakening's happening everywhere. And the question is, are we going to be consciousness or are we going to be mind? Are we going to come from a perspective in our daily existence of being all that is or little me? That's the difference between being free and being enslaved by these silly people in dark suits and those behind them. This guy Ramana Maharshi was an Indian guy. I went to the place where he did this once a few months ago. And he spent most of his life just meditating. I mean, that's an option. It's not something I choose to do, but it's an option. I mean, we can do that. And what it did was help him see the difference between mind and consciousness. And he said, mind is consciousness which is put on limitations. You are originally unlimited and perfect. Later you take on limitations and become the mind. Perfect. That's what we do. So we can start to see, and I'll get more into this in the last section, we can start to see how we can turn this bloody key and open this door, which you can't do unless you get into these deep levels of understanding the nature of reality. And Einstein said, a human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feeling as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. And that's exactly what it is, an optical delusion. So it's not just freeing our mind, it's freeing ourself from mind, or freeing ourself from the domination of mind on our sense of perception. And, you know, all the way through what we call history, these basic truths have been repeated. It's nothing new, it's just we're getting more to understand them in the mainstream. We have these vortex systems called chakras, wheels of light, the word means, which connect us into the energy level of us from the body computer. And the key connection is through what we call the heart chakra here. So people talk about love and they symbolize the physical heart. Actually, that comes from originally from this heart vortex, the understanding that this is the seat of connection to consciousness. There are other connections as well, like the right side of the brain, which I'll get to shortly. But the heart is a key connection. And it's the difference between the head and the heart is the difference between thought, particularly left brain thought, which is what most people are stuck in, and intuitive, the word again, knowing. How many times do we just know that we've got to go somewhere, that we know we ought to do this, that we know we really ought to do that? And this is going, you can't do that, you've got a mortgage, you've got a cat. What will your mother think? What will the people on the bar think? And it's talking this out, oh, yeah, okay. And the thing that changed my life 20 years ago, dramatically, is when I made one decision. Every time my head and my intuitive knowing are at odds, I'm going with this, every time. And what happens, and it happened with me, when you follow this, you can get in some interesting situations in this world of head when you're coming from another point of perception. And this is going, see, told you what happened if you didn't listen to me, there you go. But if you keep with it, eventually, your life becomes this synchronistic journey which takes you to places that you want to go. And after a while, this observes and it goes, hold on a second, you might get into some scrapes when you follow this, but it all works out in the end. And it all works out not because or despite the scrapes you got into, but because of them. And at that point, the head and the heart come into alignment and you think and feel the same thing. The war ends that most people are in. The heart has its own energy field. There's far more to the heart, even the physical heart, than ever people have understood, even genetically. And when I'm talking about love, I'm not talking about I love you, saw you down the disco, darling, not that. I'm talking about a level of love that you really have to experience because there's no words to describe it. And when I was in that ayahuasca state, the opening line of this female voice was, the only thing you really need to know is infinite love is the only truth, everything else is illusion. In other words, the existence of one infinite consciousness, that's the only truth. Everything else is illusion. It's the manifestation and manifestations of that consciousness in many and various ways. But the manifestations are the illusion. The consciousness is the base reality of everything. And a line from one of my books, love is not something you're in, it is something you are. That's the difference. It's interesting, I've talked to people who work in mind control and stuff, or used to, And they tell me that if you stimulate a certain part of the brain, you can get anyone to fall in love with anyone, as long as they stimulate their part of the brain as well. You'll get this attraction. It's electrochemical attraction. We call it love. It's actually attraction. Love is something beyond what we perceive to be love in this world. And when we close the heart, and fear and stress and all that stuff close the heart chakra very, very powerfully, that's when we end up. And also fear of being different means fear of following the heart intuition because of what people will say about you because you're acting in ways that are different. And that's that puts us in these eggshells. And when we open the heart, we're dealing with a level of love, call it cosmic love, unconditional love. There are many descriptions for it, but it's love that you have to feel to understand what it is, and I'm sure many people in this room have, although it's fleeting within the world sometimes that we experience. And when we open up, then we connect with all that is, and then we start to access levels of intuitive awareness that start to make the complex world of things and apartness become, whoa, that's how it goes together then. And without that, we're just lost in confusion, lost in the world of mind, which sees everything in apartness. I was in the bath last year, because I have one occasionally, and I'm sitting there with my duck or whatever, and don't know what I was doing. And I got this real clear picture in my mind from nowhere. First of all, there was this billowing energy, which I took to be consciousness. Why, I don't know, but that's what came. And then an eye appeared in this energy. And then in front of the eye came a telescope. And at the end of the telescope was this world, this earth and this universe and all the rest of it. And then the telescope morphed into a human body. And I got Neil Haig to paint it for me. And that's so symbolic of what we experience in this reality. We are experiencing a certain kind of experience with this reality gives to us. And there's nothing wrong with the experience. It's fine. I mean, it's an experience. But what the body does is it telescopes us into a certain range of frequencies and therefore perception. And through the body, we see the world in a very different way. Now, we can use the telescope, the body, knowing that it's a telescope, in which case we've got consciousness and we've got the telescopic, if you like, apartness experience. But when consciousness is no longer connected, we're just left with a telescopic view of everything. And that's why we see things in such narrow terms all the time when we cease to be consciousness. And the energy field, or the energy of we are, connects into the body through things like the endocrine system and the pineal gland, which people connect to the third eye of psychic sight and all the rest of it. And that's how we connect into the computer. We have an auric field, and the lower auric field in the body, that's what I call body awareness, because the body is not just what we call a physical body, it's also an energy field. And together, that's what I will refer to as the mind. And it's interesting, when you put an electrical charge through a wire, it throws out a magnetic field, an electromagnetic field. And of course, this is now well known, down the central nervous system through what we call the crown chakra, right down through and out the base chakra, there is energy, electrical energy going through all the time, and it throws out this electromagnetic field. That together, I would suggest, is what we call mind. And it's the same with the earth. For reasons I'll get to in this section, everything is a mirror of everything else. Same thing happens with the earth. You have that electromagnetic charge, which becomes the energy field of the earth. Now, when we open this auric field and connect to the wider levels of consciousness, then we have everything we need. But the way the world is manipulated, coldly and calculatedly, is designed to close that auric field so that we operate only in that level of awareness that I call the mind. And that's how the few control the many. And when we operate within the mind, we basically go round and round and round in what we call life, following the programs of the mind. Because the body is a biological computer, and it can be programmed to take on certain perceptions of reality. And the ones that we're programmed to take on because of the manipulation are ones of limitation, of I can't, little me, I have no power. And that's how we get infinite consciousness into a state of believing that it is impotent. But of course, if the few are going to control the many, that has to happen. Otherwise, they can't do it. So this fork in the road that we're now facing, you know, it takes many expressions. Am I going to get involved and do something about this, or am I going to run away? Yes, but at the foundation level, it's, am I going to go with my head? Am I going to stay in mind? Or am I going to go with my heart and go into consciousness? Ideally, a balance of the two. But that's the choice, and this has to be the governor, and this the servant. In most people, this is the governor, and that's why we have the world that we live in. We live in a world of mind. Pope John Paul II said the worst prison would be a closed heart. I must say the irony of someone from the Roman Catholic Church saying that is not lost, but I do take the point. And the heart is the key. The key to opening that auric field so consciousness and mind start to work together. And my God, what a different world we'd live in if we went from that state that we're in now. And so what we're looking at among billions of people are people entrapped in mind. And because of the way the mind perceives reality as everything is apart and not connected, and it sees things in complexity instead of the connection of everything, we are in a situation where we are a manipulator's party trick when we're in that state. And one of the key ways that we are disconnected from consciousness is when and we're encouraged to do it all the time again, you know, how many times again do we use these relationships to time in words and reality? Yeah, I used to find it, when I was in mind, like everyone else gets caught in mind, I was trying to work out years and years and years ago this thing that there was no time. I knew intuitively there was no time, but this, I couldn't get my bloody head around that bugger. But now it's so bloody obvious that there is no time. There is only one place, there is only one time, and that's what has become known as the now. And the now is where consciousness is. Because consciousness operates in the now, a state of no time, if we can be pulled into a connection to time, and past, present, and future, by definition, we are already disconnecting from consciousness, because that's in a state of no time, and suddenly our perception has gone into a state of time. How many people, and I'm talking about myself this over the years too, big time. How many of us, we don't live in the now. We live in the past, what we perceive the past. If only, what if, oh my God, oh, what I did. And we live in the future, which is a projection. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh, gotta. Oh my goodness me, what's going to happen about the future? Oh my God. We're pulled in our terms of our focus of perception and experience, second by second, using time language again, into the past and into the future. And in doing so, we get pulled out of consciousness, which is no time, the now. And yet, you say to people, okay, the past. You keep going on about the past. Where's the past? Where is it? And they say, well, it's the past. No, where is it? Where is it located? And people go on about the future, and you go, okay, fine. Well, where is the future? Where is it? Where is it located? This is the fact. The only place that exists, the only time that exists, is the now. The only moment that you can change anything is in the now, because it's all that exists in reality once we peel back the illusion. When we are thinking about the past, memory, where are we when we're thinking about the past? In the now, the only place we can be. Where are we when we're thinking about and fearing the future? We're in the now, the only place we can be. And by pulling us into the past and the future in our perception, which is just a memory and a projection, we're pulled out of the only moment that we can actually change anything, the now. And that's where consciousness is, because that's where consciousness lies, in the now. As John Lennon said brilliantly in a song, life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And we're busy making other plans here, just a projection, and here, just a memory. And we don't live in the moment, which is the only moment that we can change anything. So once we get pulled into this time, and again, I've got a watch on, because we have a time situation today, which I want to keep to, although I think I'll go over, because I've got so much to say. But we're in a time situation. So, but in acknowledging that there is a time illusion, you can still be in the now while still accepting that there's a time illusion, because you know it's an illusion, and therefore it doesn't pull you into past and future. It's like that near-death experience has said. There is no time, there is no sequence of events, no such thing as limitation of distance, of period, of time, of place. I could be anywhere I wanted to be simultaneously. At that moment, that person was in the now. And the conspiracy wants to pull us out of that all the time. All the time, time. How many times do we say time? The whole of this society is based on time. What's the time? I haven't got the time. Have you got the time? Oh, I'm running out of time. Oh, God, is that the time? How much time do I have? It's all, and when we really, it's one of the things, you know, it's like, you know, when you're in the street and you haven't noticed something, and then someone will say to you, hey, have you seen that new car that's just come out? And you'll go, no. And they'll go, oh, there's one, look. And from that moment on, you keep seeing this bloody new car all over the place. You've never seen it before, never noticed it, because you bring it into the conscious. You bring it out of the subliminal into the conscious. And when you start to look at some of these things, you realize just how much time and a sense of time dominates the society, and that pulls us out of the now. It pulls us out of consciousness, unless we recognize it's an illusion. All the time, we're watching the clock. And in the now, there's no time. And when we're in mind, there is a perception of time, not time itself. As William Blake, a great British writer, said, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Everything is in the now. And, you know, you can symbolize it in a way when you're passing across a computer disc or a DVD, you're watching a movie, and the movie bits that you've watched, the scenes you've watched, your perception is the past. The bits you've not yet watched are your perception of the future, but the only thing that you're experiencing and can experience on that DVD is the now, and that's where that laser is reading at that moment, and that's what we're doing without realizing it. And that's why I wrote a book years ago, a few years ago now, not that many, called Tales from the Time Loop, and it was to symbolize this round and round situation we get, following time, thinking we're going from past through present to future, when there is only one now. And that is where consciousness lies, and that's where we can access it in its true magnitude.